virtually every living thing on the planet now in their tissue has forever chemicals. How in the world is anybody hormonally normal? If I can teach people how to upregulate their cell detox pathways, you have a chance. And it's not so simple to sit in a sauna, as I said earlier, just to do a juice cleanse. It's not that simple. It's these pathways that need fixed.
Dr. Pompa, appreciate you coming on today, brother.
Yeah, good to be here.
I guess the simple but complicated question is, what led you to where you're at today?
I didn't choose it. It chose me.
That's usually how it works.
Yeah, exactly. Pain to purpose. It was in 1999. I got very sick. Didn't know what was going on. Back up. I didn't get very sick overnight. It started like everyone else, right? Fatigue. Yep. What's going on?
I'm not sleeping.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like this weird anxiety. Like all of a sudden, he's got problems that show up. This shows up. And, it was an evolution, but I was thinking I was overtraining. I was overworking. 2 young kids at the time, very busy practice. And all of a sudden, life started getting really, really hard. And like most people too, right? It's like I narrowed it down to like, okay, my adrenals are shot. I'm overtraining on the bike. I was racing bikes at the time, right? So pulled back on that. Matter of fact, I remember taking 2 weeks off the bike thinking like, oh, I'm going to come back strong. It got worse. I would ride 5 miles as opposed to 100 and get a headache. So now it was really complicating, right? And I found myself, like most people, chasing different foods. Like, this is not right with me now. Like, never had that before. But it started with energy loss. Like, just what's going on? So of course that's why I thought my adrenals.
And the mental fatigue, I'm sure, came shortly after.
The brain fog, right? Like, and then it was the anxiety. Then it was the sleepless nights. Then it was feelings of dread, sound sensitivity, mood changes, anger, irritability. Like I became this person I wasn't. And then then you start down the road, and internet wasn't what it was then as it is today. But I started, okay, it's got to be my thyroid. I was like, hair was thinning. I remember seeing my hair in the drain. And like, oh my gosh, whose hair is it? I didn't think it was mine by any means. And it was
And then
mine.
you look at your hand, see a bunch of it, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like, so I chased my adrenals, chased my thyroid, chased my hormones, but I wasn't upstream to the real cause. And years of figuring that out, I was pretty darn sick for 3-4 years. And then fast forward, everything I teach today, I've been teaching doctors for 20 years, came out of everything I believe God showed me for such a time as this right now.
What was your specialty going into healthcare?
I was a structural correction chiropractor.
Okay.
And I focused on structural correction. And, I remember I tapped into this thought the other day. That's why I'm speaking it now probably. But I remember dreading going to work. It was very difficult. I was hoping, I remember looking at my book, Celebrating Cancels. God forbid I had a new patient, because that was a lot of work.
That's like an hour versus like
exactly.
a 15-minute.
I was laying down in between patients, and I went from extreme busy practice to where like I was hiding. I was embarrassed. So I was hiding it from my staff. I was hiding it from my distant family. Of course, my direct family, my wife and I couldn't hide it from. They were in it with me. But I was embarrassed, and I would go lay down in between patients just to try to have enough energy. Yeah. And so, it was like this. I wasn't the doctor I needed to be. I wasn't the father. I wasn't the husband. And so it came crashing down. But out of it was built what I'm here because of it, right? Pain to purpose.
We've all had that journey, and it's, fighting through it and getting to the other side of it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't easy for that 3-4 years of you figuring it out. It sucked. And people probably looked at you a little crazy, like, oh, you're fine. Your labs are good, but keep on chugging.
Dude, that was probably some of the hardest parts about it. I remember, one of my friends and business partners at that time, he ran another practice, telling me, man, you just need to exercise more and do this, right? It's like, exercise more.
I'm riding a bike 100
miles.
Yeah,
no, exactly. It's like, his advice was very, it angered me first, and then I got emotional later. But people didn't understand. I remember, look, I went and spent $5,000 worth of blood work. The reason I didn't remember the number, Brian, is because I didn't have insurance. So it was like out of my, and just by the way, my wife and I remortgaged our home. I mean, when this battle goes on, I was the guy who wasn't afraid to do anything, spend money I didn't even have, because I knew I couldn't
find the answer.
Yeah, because I couldn't live my life like that. Death was not my fear. Mm-hmm. It was living my life like that. Like that's was the scary part. Yeah.
And a lot of people luckily never see that. But when you're in it, fucking sucks not having any of those answers.
Hard. When that day, I remember, I found the head of toxicology. This was down the road after I realized something's more t's my adrenals, something's more than my thyroid. The head of toxicology, Allegheny General Hospital in Pittsburgh, the best of the best, right? And I even found mercury toxicity online, and it was from Mad Hatter's disease. Do you remember what that is? They were using mercury to make hats, and they all went nuts, right? I'm like, I'm this, right? So he ran mercury, but he ran $5,000 worth of tests. And I remember the day. I remember what he looked like, right? And him looking at me, and he said, son, you're healthier than I am. I mean, it's like, that was the worst day of my life.
I just spent $5,000 I didn't have to look at a report that I know there's something wrong.
Absolutely. Honestly, if he would have came at me and said, hey, we think you have this cancer or something, I'd be like, all right, now I know I'm not crazy. Let's go. let's figure it out. But, having that said that there's nothing wrong and you're healthy, and that was kind of the point you made. It was like, man, that was hard, and I got that again and again and again, because I went to every doctor. I went to I remember going to, for my gut, right? I went to the top guy on that, and
doing all those fun
I'm
tests.
like, dude, do I have I have parasites? It's like, and I went through it all, right? And then you go through the absurdities in alternative medicine, right? I did it all. Right. I did the things that, once you kind of go through that looking for the normal thing.
Other way.
Yeah, exactly. Then you start doing the things that nobody does. Right. I was willing to do anything, but nothing was working.
So what was the actual issue at the end of the day?
So to finish that story, right, I thought I had mercury toxicity. The blood test came back negative. And I was working with one of the top endocrinologists in the country, and he became a friend. I read his books, and he said, Dan, I think you have mercury toxicity. And I said, I thought so too. I did a blood test. It was normal. And he said, wrong test. That would be if you had acute, like Mad Hatters. They were using mercury all day, every day. It would show up in the blood, but I think you might have chronic. He really gathered that obviously from a host of symptoms I had, but also my body temperatures were really weird. High at some points, but very low consistently. And it led him to think that I had mercury toxicity. And as it turned out, I did. And it was crazy because I knew that me trying to balance my hormones downstream, I knew it was something in the pituitary. I just couldn't figure it out. And as it turned out, I had a lot of mercury accumulation, which studies show it accumulates in the pituitary hypothalamus, which is your control tower for all your hormones. And no wonder I couldn't figure it out. No wonder I couldn't balance it. No wonder the feedback to the hypothalamus, was not right. Everything was out of whack. So that's why I was hormonally imbalanced, but I didn't know what it was. But something I teach today, typically when people don't feel well and can't figure it out, it's a perfect storm. You remember the movie George Clooney? I'm older than you, but that was like a 90s movie. But, but it was the perfect storm was 3 weather fronts that come together and create a catastrophic storm. That's typically what happens. So mercury was part of my storm. I was also living in a low-grade moldy home that, probably wasn't affected me. Maybe it would have taken 10 years before it wore me down. Added to it. I was training, as I mentioned, on the bike. So I had a lot of physical stress, busy practice. Those 3 stressors, boom. Yeah. And then as I described, the bucket overflows. And that's when this weird symptoms start. That's when, so how do we get people well? We have to empty that stress bucket, physical, chemical, emotional, look for people's perfect storm. And, it's part of what I teach.
And that's before detox was a thing of heavy metals and all of that. And so how'd you even go about finding a solution once you had the answer?
When you go online, even then, it's a shit show of bad information, especially around this topic of detox. And one of the things, I think my passion for 20 years of teaching doctors is, refocusing them on what real detox is. And that's a cellular issue. It's not as simple as sitting in saunas. I love saunas, have one. It's not as simple as foot baths. It's not as simple as the 10-day cleanse and cilantro, chlorella. I mean, all these things that our, place, our little space thinks is detox. The juice cleanse, the fast. I wrote a book on fasting, but it's not detox. What's really happening and why we see this surge in thyroid conditions, hormone problems, all these crazy things that people are dealing with. the cellular detox pathways that work day in and day out are getting exhausted because of the onslaught of
Everything we're encountering.
the heavy metals is one thing, right? I mean, now we have aluminum falling from the sky because they use it in jet fuel to make jets more efficient, right? It's like, it's all about the money, right? It's not a conspiracy.
The plastic from water bottles.
Plastic from waters. We ingest a credit card size a week, right? I mean, everyone watching this probably knows all these numbers, but what it's doing is it's exhausting our cellular pathways in our cells. We have 50 to 70 trillion cells. And when they're functioning good, we feel good.
I guess the simple way to explain it is the filter's clogged.
Yeah, exactly. But the filter is in the cells. Yeah, our liver, our gut, our lungs, our lymph all play our kidneys, a downstream role. But what our space isn't focused on is what's wrong in the cell. So my saying, as you may have heard, is fix the cell to get well. That's how I got my life back. And that is, if you can fix that, now you get the body doing what it should be doing day in, day out. When you make energy in your cell, you make waste. It's like burning wood in a fireplace, right? If you don't get rid of that smoke, you die from the smoke, not the flames. That's what happens when you make energy in your cells. You make waste that has to get out of that cell. When your pathways are exhausted, your own energy production starts to endogenously, meaning in the cell, starts to toxify you. And then it starts to trigger genes of susceptibility, turns on genes. And now you're diagnosed with a thyroid condition. It's a cell problem.
Yeah, like for me, it's 15 years ago, I was working 80 hours a week, every day at 3 o'clock. Drink a Red Bull, drink a coffee, pass out.
You just described most of America, right?
And I'm like, why the fuck am I passing out at 3 o'clock? I just pounded all this sugar, caffeine, should be good to go. Do it for like 2 months. Finally going to the doctor's office, run my labs. He's like, Brian, your test is at 100. It's like, did you abuse steroids? I'm like, dude, I'm 240 pounds. Like, I'm fat. Like, I didn't fucking abuse steroids.
If I abuse steroids, would I look like
this? Would I look like this? He's like, all right, you're right. And it's one of the guys I used to work with. He's like, you know what? Go for an MRI. What the fuck does one have to do with the other? He's like, I'll call you if it's something. He's like, calls me a couple days later. He's like, got a pituitary adenoma. Now what? He's like, that's out of my wheelhouse. I'm infectious disease. I'm like, okay. Go to endocrines here, Mayo. I got 20 different answers. Traveling the country, I'm like, dude, can someone just balance my hormones? And then we figure out how to deal with the adenoma. And finally, like, I found someone to balance it and everything. But no one's ever really said what you've said of, you got to detox the cells.
Yeah.
And so I'm fixing the symptoms, but not the issue.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. You and I had that something in common for different reasons. Isn't that interesting? You knew what it was like to be hormonally out of balance, trying everything you could.
Oh.
The problem was here.
And I went to a doctor and he's like, it's because you're fat. You have low testosterone. I was like, really? That's your answer?
Yeah, that's your answer. Yeah. So I guess you were just unlucky. Or, you know, again, my brain looks for cause, right? Medicine today they're not.
No,
we're not a thought process.
We're not pre-treating. We're, you know, after the fact. Like, I now travel the world, going to Mexico for detox treatments, going to Colombia for stem cells, all the stuff we should be doing stateside that, you know, modern medicine here just doesn't like it.
You know, and I love stem cells. They changed my world. We could have a whole conversation there, you know. But, you know, if you don't get to the upstream cause, and when we look at why people are so sick today, right? We are in a time of history, the lowest testosterone in males
ever
in history of humans, lowest sperm count in the history of humans. It's not, there's a reason. There's a reason. Every expert knows it's the level of toxins that we're under. We talked about plastic. We could have forever chemicals, heavy metals. We could go down this list.
Outgas.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But, you know, yet even in our alternative space, they're missing it, man. And, you know, that's my point, is that people go to functional medicine doctors. They go and spend a lot of money on fancy IVs, a lot of fancy treatments. Biohacks are taking over. And yet, how much of it really is getting to the cause of why
3%?
Yeah, exactly. and it can help, right? I mean, I'm all for different biohacks. I love it, right? I do them. But that's not how I got my life back. I got my life back by getting the mercury out of my pituitary hypothalamus, and then my hormones started coming back on board. And again, that's my story, but it could be, we find people that have hidden infection in their jaw that is, you know,
people aren't doing the cone beam scans and whatnot.
Absolutely. We find people in moldy homes that are just decimating them. But alternative medicine's not even saying, let's examine those things. They're just putting people on a lot of expensive vitamins, minerals. They're putting them up here. Hey, let's give you more probiotics because gut is everything now. But wait a minute, what's crushing the gut? Oh, get off gluten, get away from lectins and plant toxins and phytates, right? We had this conversation ahead. It's so popular. And I'm not saying don't do that, but it's not the problem, right? I mean, it's why are so many people reacting to plants? Plants haven't changed, right? Nope. What's changed is the gut. But what is affecting the gut? It's the toxins that we're talking about that are literally in our cells more than any time in the history of man.
Which is insane that it still hasn't been addressed, and we could go down a whole rabbit hole the other way.
Yeah, it's true.
How does someone, we have the extremes in this situation, but how does the average person know if they need to detox or that there's something clogged in their system, or just are there certain telltales of, oh, this is like the precursor to X, your skin's starting to change color, your hair's starting to fall out?
When we look at, I think I did a social media video on this, but it's like when we look at the people that like the 3 signs, energy depletes, right? Meaning your body's now at the cellular level struggling. And there's a lot of focus on the mitochondria, which is true. That's where we make energy. So we see some dysfunction there, and that affects our daily energy. You were pounding Red Bulls to get through a day. I'm sure in the beginning it worked.
It worked for like a week.
Yeah, exactly. People were using marijuana. People were, a lot of different stimulants, right, to get through a day. And it works for a period of time until it doesn't work. And then it's stronger stimulants, and then that doesn't work. And then you're starting to go, oh my God, what's happened to my life, right? But when we look at energy loss, then it starts into the brain fog. And then that's when the brain starts going and you go, can't pull up names anymore. It's where are my keys? It's like, then it's like, gosh, I read this, I can't even comprehend it anymore. That's a neurotoxic issue, man. It is. I mean, it's like, it's almost the perfect definition of it, right? So the energy loss, the brain fog, and then your body starts compensating with adrenaline and cortisol. So then anxiety starts. Weird, then sleep problems, because now the pathways are messed up, right? And then sometimes the gut kicks in, right? I mean, sometimes it's not even the gut first, right? It's like, somewhere in there, then you start running from foods. Oh, I don't do well with that food. Okay. You're toxic. Okay.
Yeah.
That I don't need a test, right? You have those symptoms. You have a neurotoxic issue.
4 hours on the average night, and I probably wake up 30 times. For me, I'm like, it is what it is. I've just gotten used to it at that point. 2
things, right? Toxic people, either exactly what you described, they can't get to sleep, or they wake up through the night, and oh my gosh, I felt like they didn't sleep, or they crash, they sleep all night and they wake up and feel like they didn't sleep.
That happens to me sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It depends on how your body's compensating, but yeah, that's without doing a test. Yeah. That's the definition of neurotoxicity, right?
Yeah.
there.
And like, the Sleep 8 mattress helped because it was regulating my body temperature throughout the night.
Yep.
It's like, oh, we adjusted you 35 times. I'm like, fuck, my body temp fluctuated that many times throughout the night where you needed to heat or cool me.
Yeah. Remember, that's why I knew my thyroid, right? It was like, my body temperatures were crazy low, and then these weird spikes. I mean, just nuts, but yeah.
And look, that's why you're the one teaching doctors now, because a lot of these doctors just don't know.
Yeah.
And they're throwing everything, when we went through med school, like they taught you some stuff, but a lot of it, got to learn on the fly.
Yeah.
And just a lot of people even today still don't want to learn on the fly. They're like, oh, they look at a Quest lab report, ranges 100 to 300.
Yeah.
Okay, you're 125, you're within range. Are you though? Exactly. And I think that's a mistake. Another, a big mistake that I see in our space, alternative space, if you will, is that we have a lot of fancy tests right now that we're running, microbiome testing, the genetic SNP testing. I'm going to, piss some people off out there, but Go for it.
I think it's misdirected. I 15 years ago got very into the SNP thing, thinking, man, this is the future. And I pulled away from it because what I did realize, maybe because I was in it so early, is what we thought we knew then is a joke now. And we've learned that it's not that simple. There's pathways around these SNPs. Just because you have them doesn't mean they express, there's so many complicating factors around it. And I would ask people, how's it changed our outcomes? Meaning all the genetic testing and all the knowing of the SNPs. It really hasn't. It really hasn't changed our outcomes. People still don't feel well, despite all their genetic tests, despite doing all these things for their gene. Because I have the MTHFR SNP and now I'm doing this. Yeah. Do you honestly feel better? Maybe a little bit, but is it lasting? Are you better? Right? It's not that simple.
I look the best I've ever been, but I don't feel the best. And it's people are like, well, which one do you want? I'm like, I want both.
Yeah, I want both too.
And, you know, it's just funny that we got to go through all these things, meet people like you randomly through social media to then like learn, oh, well, it's something right in front of your face. It's not that expensive to test, but how come nobody's done it?
You know, here we are in LA. People are spending thousands of dollars to look better, right? They want to feel better too. They're spending thousands of dollars there, you know, and it really is a cellular issue. Aging slower is a cellular issue. Your camera guy over here, he pulled up a picture of me because we knew each other back then, right? 5 years ago. And he literally, he wanted to see what I looked like. He said, let's see how you look now and then, right?
Look better now.
Yeah, you both said that. So thank you for that. But I you know, say all that to say, what have I done to look younger now than I did 5 years ago? I practice what I preach. I mean, honestly, your cells, your cellular health determines your energy, your brain ability to focus, and how you age, whether you age slow or not. You know, and I do. I fast a lot appropriately. I detox still. I still do what got me well, even though you would say
frequently.
You know, I do it more infrequently. Okay. When I was getting my life back, I would do 3 days on a detox cycle, 4 days off, and then it was like maybe 3 or 4 or 5 days on, 10 days off, right? And then now I probably do a detox cycle just randomly once a month, but that's okay. Because the fact is my body detoxes itself much better than it used to.
Yep.
I would argue genetically, I'm not that great of a detoxer. And that's part of the reason I got set up for what happened. But the fact is that we are inundated with the amount of toxins we're under. I made that point earlier. But, you know, when I started doing social media, which really wasn't that long ago, in the process of researching like what is going on and starting researching different topics, I'm telling you, it convicted me to where I started doing my detox cycles more often. And I really believe if you want to age slow or function at the highest level possible, you have to detox at the cellular level today. It's not as simple as dietary change. No. Even staying lean, like longer in life, I'm telling you, toxins have more to do with the inability to lose weight than does even the foods we eat. And yeah, the foods carry a lot of the toxins in, but I'm telling you, it's the reason for hormone disruption. And if you want to talk about why people can't be lean and have normal energy and normal brains, you know, it is hormones, but it's toxins' effect on hormones that are driving the problem. And again, that's my passion. You know, I have to believe God showed it to me. I got sick for it. You know, and I've been teaching it for 20 some years. I think now it's just in vogue. I hope it is.
Well, and I think with the power of social media now and your presence and going on all these different podcasts and going where you went last night, like you're spreading it now. Before it was just niched and, you know, whoever you could physically touch at the time 20 years ago learned about it. But now one of your videos goes viral, gets a million views.
Yeah.
It's a million people that didn't know about whatever you're talking about that
No,
day.
it's true. Yeah.
And it's just, you know, Gary's getting the awareness out there. Everybody,
love Gary.
Everybody's now, I wish the medical community worked together instead of, you know, one person doing one thing and another to really synergize and really grow it. Because then exponentially the growth would be insane for everyone.
That's true. Yeah, you know, it's true. You know, like, you know, Gary Brecka has such a good niche in the biohacking world, and he does a great job there. And we have these little communities. David Avocado Wolf, he has his niche. David, sorry, the hippie community over there, but I love the guy. But you're right. Imagine if we, you know, got together. You know what's amazing is I told you this before we were on air here. I went to that lecture last night. Amazon is entering into the health space.
Yep.
I wanted to know what they know and what their goal is, right? So that was some of my questions last night. So here we are before this guy who reports to Bezos himself, right? So here, you know, this guy was like, you know, responsible for Prime, you know, and here they are entering the space. He said, he made it clear from the beginning. He said, our goal at Amazon isn't to change healthcare. I think that's impossible. Our goal is to make it easier and simple in all the areas that we're looking at healthcare going, why is that so hard? Why is that so? I'm like, that's a brilliant business model, isn't it? Because that's what they did in shipping, right? And getting goods that we want. They're doing it in healthcare. So my first question was, okay, man, you said like, this is disruptive. You said that people are online, that the drug companies don't put the prices. They do that for a reason, right? Because they can gouge you. There's delays. There's all this. I said, so you're coming in and changing that. How's that going to go over with Big Pharma? And he was like, to your point, we realize we have to work with them, you know, and they have to sell them on the fact that they're going to sell more drugs because making it easier. And say, okay, well,
good luck.
If it was you and I, we'd have people, we'd be shut down like immediately. But the fact that it's Amazon, it might work. We'll see. But the fact is then my second question was, are you all going after the alternative space, right? And he said, yeah, not anytime soon. There's enough problems right here that, because they're talking about virtual, right? Able to have virtual appointments with doctors. And that's part of what I do. And virtual appointments, getting things online easier, doing this online easier. And they're not walking into our space yet. Yet.
Give it 3 years.
Yeah, you're right. And, here's the thing. I think the lesson that we all need to learn from it is, how do we make it simpler? How do we make it easier? Because
what we were talking about offline before was like your son saying, hey, simplify the videos.
Yeah, exactly.
Stop taking it so far. Just get to the nuts and bolts.
We should probably,
We'll clip into that.
Yeah, we'll clip into that. But that's the funny thing is, even last night, that message was to me. My brain immediately went, if I want to impact the world, which I do, there's a God calling on my life for this. And when I was sick, I have to say that it was horrible on my wife. I had 2 kids at the time. I have 5 now. And my wife literally on her knees crying out to God for an answer. God spoke to her heart. Not only am I going to get him well, meaning me, but he's going to take a message to the world. When she would tell me that, I didn't want to hear it, because I would say to her, I can't even get myself well. I sit here because of those prophetic words that were spoken over my life. But if my vision is to take it to the world, last night I thought to myself, I've got to make it simpler and easier. The message, the process. And I got on the phone with my oldest son, who's CEO of my business. And that was my first conversation, is like, we got to make it simpler and easier. It's like we all need to take a lesson from are they the number 1 company? I don't know. They're huge, right?
They're top 5,
yeah,
whatever it is.
Exactly.
And, I guess if you can explain it to a child, you can explain it to anyone.
Yeah, and exactly. And I learned on social media, simple, 1 point, 1 message, very easy. And what I said, the reason I hated social media is that I felt like you couldn't say anything in a minute and a half that would make a difference in people's lives. Come on. What I teach is, needs more explanation. I'm a teacher. I love it. And man, was I wrong. My youngest son, who runs my social media, here was the day, right? It was, Dad, do this video. It was not using a plastic cutting board. And my exact words to him were, that's stupid. Like, come on. Like, why does it, anyway, it went to like millions of views, right? And that's when I learned, and again, it's not stupid, right? It's like, if we can get someone to think that through, that all those plastic pieces are going into their meat, people right now are going, we're using a plastic cutting board. They're watching this.
Like I'm thinking about it, every restaurant, they can't even use wood cutting boards.
Yeah, I know, because there's bacteria issues, right? And
but you still have bacteria issues in the microplastics when you're cutting into
right?
it. So.
Yeah, just put vinegar on it. You solve that problem, right? But yeah, anyways, that's an example of, keeping it simple. We need to learn from Amazon to close that loop.
Yeah, I don't know. Which way do you see it headed in the next 5 years? Just in the biohacking / detoxing space, and just with all the GMOs and everything, which way do you see people being able to navigate through all of this?
Well, look, it's becoming more clear to more people that it's toxins of why they don't feel well. I think that's why detox is in vogue now. I think, fasting's in vogue. A lot of things, I studied fasting in the 90s when it was me and some natural hygiene society people, very uncool little group, but I was fascinated by it. But I think these things are coming in vogue because people are realizing. I mean, look at this. Look at the talk about plastic. A year ago, if I would have brought up plastic,
They would have left you.
yeah, people would have not tuned in. Now they're tuning in, right? Because we realize that plastics are disrupting our hormones. You said it, right? You were in a space where giving hormones, right? We have a space right now where everyone's trying to take this hormone, that hormone. There's a time and a place. I'm not saying there's not, but it's ultimately not the lasting solution. And I always say, once you step into the hormone game, it's a hard game to win long term, because as you know, you start taking testosterone, your testicles shrivel up, and then you're not breaking it yourself.
You got to hit
Right? Yeah.
HCG.
Then the other thing is people don't understand innate intelligence, in that your body's innate intelligence is adjusting hormones right now. Your body's it's looking at your cortisol levels, it's looking at your testosterone levels, it's evaluating it and making adjustments through the hypothalamus pituitary, was where our problem was differently. But the fact is this complicated intelligence and balance goes on all day long. When you take a hormone, you're saying this is the level, and you're pushing out innate intelligence. And again, I step back and say, there's a time and a place. If your testosterone levels are 100, you better do something about it while you're figuring out what's upstream. But if you're not dealing with the chemicals in your life, I would argue at the cellular level correctly, getting rid of these things. It's like the bathtub upstairs overflowing and us downstairs bucketing the water out.
We're not fixing that.
Yeah, exactly. And there's two ways to fix it. First thing I would argue is shut off the water, at least slow it down, and then open up that drain. Right? And because maybe the drain's clogged and that's why it's coming over, but it's that combination of slowing it down and opening the drain up
to get that balance back.
That's how I got my life back. But we have to do that at every 50,000 cells in our body, right? This is a cellular problem. So
yeah, and like someone for me that has a pituitary issue, and then I play with firearms, as I'm sponsored by several people. It's like, that's a lot of lead and gunpowder that I'm upticking every month, 1,000 rounds of ammunition. That's a lot of stuff.
I would say, this is an interesting thought, and I don't know if this is the case. I'm a cause thinker, right? Why did you get a tumor, right? Could have been random, could have been
stress.
Who knows, right? But when you look at the studies like the DRASH study was a study, one of the first, to show that the number of silver fillings in mom's mouth is proportional to how much we find in the baby's brain in utero. That study was done by taking, unfortunately, fetuses that died, and then they were looking at the mercury in the brain that they collected in utero and then comparing it to the fillings. The more fillings mom had, the more they found in the brain. Guess where? Most of it pituitary. Yeah. And that's the studies that I read, that mercury and these heavy metals, aluminum, they accumulate in the pituitary like a weird magnet for some reason. And the pineal gland too, that disrupts sleep and rhythm. So, we know that certain chemicals also, other chemicals, go right to that spot. And then we know also, what does your body do to protect itself? It wants to wall things off and form tumors, right? It's part of survival.
Yep.
Maybe we ended up with the same problem with a different compensation. Maybe, I don't know. But the point is that, here we are with so many people with a poison control tower trying to land the planes, right? When the control tower is in chaos.
They got their blinders on.
Yeah. It's like, having a drunk person in the control tower, and we're wondering why the planes are crashing, right? It's like, that's what organizes your hormones. That's what says, here's what's coming in, right? We need more T3 down here, thyroid hormone. Okay, great. Let's release some thyroid releasing hormone to get thyroid stimulating hormone in the pituitary, TSH, and then that will, it's that complicated, right? It's estrogen, progesterone, it all works the same.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like, so what if your control tower is poisoned, right? It's called central hypothyroidism, by the way.
Everything points towards mine being jacked.
Yeah. Look, I got my life back. I'm known for my cellular detox, but more specifically, where alternative medicine is going wrong and gone wrong is even when they're dealing with heavy metals, and that's only one example. They're not getting to where the problem is. Every seminar I teach to doctors, I say, listen to me, folks. The problem's in the brain. If we look at where they're neurotoxins, that means they go for the nerve system. The biggest nerve in the body is right between our ears.
Yep.
That's where they're accumulating, and that's when the bottom falls out. And we're downstream trying to fix everything, including our gut. Remember, this brain is connected to this brain, and everyone's focused on this brain.
But not that one.
But not this one. So now I'm reminding doctors that this brain is connected to this brain. You're not going to fix this brain, the gut, if you don't fix this brain. And we know that from autistic children. But we also have to remember that if we don't get the toxins out of our brain, these neurotoxins, whether it's aluminum, mercury, lead, all of them are affected. Oh, and the chemical glyphosate that they're spraying on our foods is opening up the blood-brain barrier and allowing them in deeper. That was Stephanie Seneff, senior scientist at MIT, 2012 study. She was the first to show that. But the fact is that's why people are so sick and can't figure it out. My brain detox cycle, it's phase 3 of my system. It's like, that's the key, man. That's how I got my life back.
How long does it take?
You need it.
I do. How long does it take to go through your system?
Look, the goal that I've set up is we want to teach people the process. And it's step by step, prep phase, body phase, brain phase. And the how people go through that is different for you than it would be for the next person,
Gotcha.
Me, because real detox is a cellular issue, but it's also an individual issue, meaning that what works for you may not work for the other person. So we start with my core, the Pompa method as it's called. We start with the core, and then it changes depending on who's there. So in Pompa program, which is my program that goes directly to people looking for answers, we have coaches that customize it just like that and work from, here's the causes, here's where we start, and then bring people through that process. But the goal is to teach them the process so they can do it long enough to matter.
And then keeping up that routine.
I'm still doing it. Started this
years.
Conversation there. Yeah. 20 years later, still doing it. Yeah. People need to learn the process. And that's our goal. We have the only system out there that the goal is to teach you, empower you with the process, because you can't live a normal life today without knowing it. So we teach them the process, and then that trickles into their whole family.
Have you done this on your children?
Every one of them. Here's a story, true story. My wife had started, just like many women, hormonal weird symptoms, right? Early premenopause, perimenopause, I would say. And we did a 24-hour urine hormone test. One of the best ways to look at hormones, right?
I've done a couple of those, carrying around that jug.
Absolutely, exactly. 24-hour urine.
The 2 tablets.
Absolutely, collect the urine. And her methylation was tanked, which is a way that your body gets rid of toxic hormones. But she had a very elevated estrogen metabolite called 4-hydroxyestrone. Not to confuse people, it's one that can cause breast cancer. It's linked to breast cancer and other cancers, female cancers. Her mother died of uterine cancer. 10 years, she was a success story for breast cancer, right?
Her mom.
Yeah. And I said, Joyce, you didn't get to the cause. So although they're giving you the green light on breast cancer, it's going to show up somewhere else. Showed up in her uterus. 2 years later, she was dead. My wife was heading down that same road. I mean, according to the test, 4-hydroxyestrone, she's not getting rid of these toxic estrogens. And her methylation, one of the things that gets rid of them on the same test, was low. We spent all this time, trying to feed her methylation. It wasn't working. I don't remember. Maybe it was 2 years, a year, but we found out she had extremely high levels of lead. Dude, off the chart lead, like black line across the page. To give you an idea, at that time, under 5 was normal. It's lower than that now. It's under 2. But it was 110, her lead levels. Okay, where did she get it? Number one source of lead is mom. Why? Most lead is stored in the bones. The body moves it into the bones. During pregnancy, it's very normal to lose bone. What comes out? The lead. So just as I spoke of the mercury coming from mom, the lead goes into the baby. My wife picked up her mother's lead. And then, of course, growing up in the lead
continue from your wife to your kids?
We tested my kids. So my kids, we had our babies like healthy, everything possible way. And my son was having gut issues as a baby, ripping diarrhea, different things of that sort. Tested his level, lead off the chart. My next one, his nickname was the Banshee because he had cradle cap, fungal issues, lead off the chart. So I had to detox my wife. She got it from her mother. I had to detox my kids. So that answered your question. Yes, all of my kids.
At what age was the youngest that you treated?
You know, my son Daniel, our first biological born, we started teaching. Teaching. It was teaching. We started detoxing him when he was very, very young. You know, we were literally, you know, powders, liquids, because we had to. You know, we knew that we weren't fixing his gut until we got rid of that lead level. And by the way, that's the message I don't want people to miss, is that my wife wasn't going to fix her methylation or her hormones without getting that lead level down. When that lead level came down,
then you can fix
her methylation went up, her hormones balanced, and, you know, perfect hormones. She went through menopause without ever taking a hormone. She went through, you know, she's in menopause now. She went into menopause. You know, she's 56. She's about to be 57. She's going to kill me. But I was just,
nice note.
Isn't it weird how thoughts are coming out? It's like those words are coming out and going, oh my gosh, you know, can we edit that? I don't care. She won't even watch it, hopefully. But anyways, yeah, so that's how old she is. But, you know, she just went successfully through menopause and very hormonally healthy. We had to get rid of the lead. Right, just like my kid. Yeah, my kids serve in this mission, like all of our family, and that's only part of the story because of their own experience. We adopted 2 kids. That's a whole nother story, man. That was some hard times in my life, but in a good way.
I feel like there'll be another episode.
Yeah, exactly. There's a hero story about that, but they were 7 at the time. Tragic story. They lost their parents. We ended up taking them in. The girl is chiropractor. Works in our program. She runs all our coaching.
Okay.
They're 28 now. The boy was on the autism spectrum, Asperger's, sensory integration. If you met him, amazing. You would never know it. Detoxed him as well. So to answer your question full circle, all my kids have been through it.
I have a friend, I think he's like 4. Their kid's 4-ish. He's on the spectrum, and like, you know, he'll get angry and start banging his head against the wall. And it's just like, you could just see in my friend's eyes, like they're hopeless. They're like, what do? We don't want to send him to school because we don't want him to hurt someone, but we still want him to be a kid. And it's sad, like, man. And so definitely going to send them your way and have them play with it, and be fun to showcase my journey going through it with you of just, okay, you look at my photos from 10 years ago, just like you, I turned back the clock. Yeah. But I'd like to be able to sleep 6 hours solid.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what solid is.
You know what? And again, you still have too many neurotoxins in your hypothalamus, pituitary, pineal, you know, even other parts of the brain. I wish it were as simple without biopsy of being able to, you know, test the brain and go, oh, your heavy metals are, it's not that simple. You started early on this conversation of how do people know? We still look at those symptoms that I said and go, yeah, we start, one of the things we start with is a cellular inflammation test. It's like when someone enters our program, we start there. If your cells are inflamed, you have hormone problems. You have nutrition problems.
Inflamed. I don't need a test.
But it's still not a reflection of brain metals, right? But it is absolutely, you know, a sign that you are not functioning well hormonally or in any aspect.
Then, you know, I didn't realize that much passes from the mom to the child. Yeah. And, you know, it went from your wife's mom to her. Yep. To then your kids, like that past 3 generations.
4 generations, 3 to 4, right? Yeah. I mean, we look at biblically sin, they say 3 to 4 generations, right? It's like, you know, toxins are the same way, right? 3 to 4 generations.
And like my kid's mom, both of her parents passed from cancer. And it's like, well, what's in your system? Like, what about our daughter? She was born super healthy. We did a home birth. We did, you know, everything the unconventional way. And she's an amazing kid, but I still worry about what might be in her system, especially with all the plastics and everything that we consume on a day-to-day basis.
That's right. When you look at the amount of plastic, the amount of heavy metals, the amount of forever chemicals, which forever chemicals, I've been talking about these things for so long, right? The movie Dark Waters, if people haven't seen it, they should see it. Really exposed what happened with DuPont, 3M, and how these things were released. Yeah, at the end of the movie, I took a picture of it, and because it said, basically, virtually every living thing on the planet now in their tissue has forever chemicals. You know, no one's void. Yeah, because of it. And these things are massive hormone disruptors, just like plastics, right?
How about a really simple one that most people don't want to acknowledge? Makeup.
Plastic, forever chemicals. right? I mean,
Coloring,
yeah, all of it, all the colorings, fragrance, the plugins. I mean, these things are loaded with the very things that disrupt hormones. How in the world? Is anybody hormonally normal? So that's my passion is if I can teach people how to upregulate their cell detox pathways, you have a chance. And it's not so simple to sit in a sauna, as I said earlier. It's not so simple, just to do a juice cleanse. It's not that simple. It's these pathways that need fixed. I lectured, God, I don't even remember when it was, but probably 2008, maybe. I remember I lectured in California, somewhere in LA, somewhere near here. And I remember it was a group of doctors. I remember on the plane ride home, all I was thinking is, I missed it. I missed it. I could see in their eyes that they weren't as excited as me. Okay. It's like, so all I kept thinking of is what could I have done differently? Like, they missed it. I knew I missed it. And then I literally, it's a true story. I prayed. I was like literally saying, okay, Lord, you put me on this mission. I need a way of communicating it. Ideas started coming. I reached down, grabbed my notebook, and the 5 R's was born. So the 5 R's is my roadmap of how we fix a cell, how we detox a cell. And I only utilize that to teach doctors the process of how we upregulate cell function, detox cells, but the public caught on to it. And so now it's just the framework of the Pompa method. And it's what God showed me.
It's life-changing.
It is. And that's where real detox is.
I appreciate you spreading the word out there. It's more people need to be aware. I'm happy you came on today. Like it even opened my eyes on something. I'm like, well, everybody's like, you look great. My doctors are like, hey, your labs are the best they've ever been. Okay, now what?
Yeah.
And I kind of look back, I'm like, I was skinny for a long period of time and then just my diet's never changed. I don't work out. And overnight I ballooned 100 pounds. What changed?
Yeah. What changes the onslaught, right? Yeah. We're going to get you in Pompa program, get you brain phase, man.
I appreciate you. As we wrap up, where can people find you, Dr. Pompa?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram. It's drpompa.com or .com. drpompa.com is my website, but Dr. Pompa on Instagram. Over 1 million followers there that are loyal and grateful for every one of them learning. And then pompaprogram.com is my actual program. There's even a training that was just put up there. You can watch that.
All right. Appreciate you coming on, brother.
Yeah, man. Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian.
Appreciate you.